Around 1290 BCE, give or take, a worker near Deir el-Medina, the village of the tomb builders, sat down to write a note. His name was Pa-Baki. He was a scribe, and he was part of a work team building tombs or monuments on the west bank of Waset, modern Luxor. Alas, Pa-Baki had recently welcomed a new member to his team. He had done so at the request of his father, but the new worker was proving an issue. Grabbing a shard of yellowish-grey pottery, Pa-Baki picked up a pen, dipped it in ink, and wrote a short letter. Quote, "A message from the scribe, Pa-Baki, to his father, the scribe of the outlines, Ma-Ni Nakdef. He says, I heeded what you told me when you said, let Ibi work with you. But look, he spends all day bringing a jug of water, even though there is no other task assigned to him. Every day. He has not heeded your admonition when you said, what have you accomplished today? Behold, the sun has set, and he is still far away with the jug of water." End quote. In the hills west of Waset, the desert looms large. Builders working at the Valley of the Kings, Queens, the Nobles' tombs, and Deir el-Medina itself all relied on deliveries of water to slake their thirst. These would come in jugs, either carried by donkeys or slung across poles and held on the shoulders of porters. Alas, the newcomer Ibi was not pulling his weight. Literally. Pa-Baki wanted it fixed. I love this letter. This could easily be a modern text message from the site foreman complaining to their supervisor. And chances are you have had that co-worker. When there's a task to be done, they are nowhere to be found. And when you get them on a job, you won't see them again for hours or the rest of the day. The fact we have a record of something similar from 3,300 years ago is great fun. A reminder of people being people. Around 1290 BCE, our story is in an era that scholars call the Early Ramessid period. The king is Usur-Ma'ad-Ra, Ramesses II, and the epoch generally is defined by rulers of Ramesses' family. For the past several episodes, we have been entangled in the affairs of the king, great monuments, rituals, and significant campaigns. But in the aftermath of some major events, it is a good time for a breather, to see what else was happening in the wider Egyptian society. One of the great things about the early Ramessid era is how much writing survives. Letters, instructions, orders, receipts, commemorative stelae given to the gods, tombs, and small artifacts. Inscriptional material is abundant. The causes for such a huge volume of information are slightly unclear. There might be a social reason. Literacy may have gone up in recent decades, producing more scribes and people who could leave a written record. Or there might have been economic factors. Maybe papyrus and ink were being produced in greater quantities, making such writing more accessible to the wider populace. Or it may simply be an accident of preservation. Communities like Deir el-Medina, where we get a lot of the writing, were much smaller in the 18th dynasty, but under the early Ramessids, that town consolidated, grew, and became much more prominent. So it naturally produced a larger volume of material, more likely to survive. One of these reasons, or several in combination, are all possible, but speculative. The best we can say for sure is that starting around 1300 BCE, written records for daily life are much better preserved, and that will only increase in the coming centuries. As you can imagine, this is wonderful for historians. Compared to earlier generations, we get so many more glimpses of daily life, business, social interactions, and the concerns of ordinary folks. Today, I would like to give you a sample of these daily life tales, particularly letters from early Ramessid Egypt. The following stories take place in the early 19th dynasty generally, so in terms of chronology, we can place these events around 1300 BCE and the few decades afterwards. So, let's begin. Our first letter comes from the north, in the city Men-Nefer, or Memphis. For nearly 2,000 years, the great city had been the administrative capital for northern Egypt. It sprawled along the west bank of the Nile, and its canals, waterways, and harbours bustled as they had for countless years. Within the city of Men-Nefer, there was a man named Jehuti-Mes, or Thutmose. He was a minor bureaucrat who worked on a farming estate that belonged to the king Ramessid I. That ruler was deceased, but the agricultural land produced offerings for the temples that honoured his memory. Thutmose was a worker on one of those estates, and part of his responsibilities included the animals, specifically a donkey. Unfortunately, Thutmose had loaned one of the donkeys from the estate to a colleague, and the borrower had not yet returned the animal. Thutmose wanted it back, but that was proving harder than expected. Quote, "The guardian of the estate of Ramessid I, Jehuti-Mes, greets the overseer of cattle, Pa-Iri, in life, prosperity, and health. Now, please return the donkey for hire that you have in your possession. I remind you that one donkey was given to you by the soldier Tenen from the army regiment called Glittering Like the Aten. In the year of the bow of Jeper, he, Tenen, told you to give the donkey to me, Jehuti-Mes, but you didn't. I apprehended you in Men-Nefer, Memphis, saying, 'Give the animal back.' And you said to me, 'Please do not take me to the court. Behold, the donkey is in my command. Did you ever send someone to take it, and I refused to hand it over?' That is what you said. And you took an oath by the Lord, life, prosperity, health, and you said, 'I will return the donkey.' But still, you have not caused it to be returned." End quote. There's a couple of curious details here. Thutmose describes the donkey as being for hire. The phrase literally translates as copper on the hoof, which seems to be a way of counting the value of the animal in metal and connecting it with the work that the donkey could potentially do. We don't have many examples of this phrase, copper on the hoof, but it gives an insight to the economic mindset. The ancient Egyptians did not use currency, but around 1300 BCE, the value of copper was starting to operate in a similar way. For Thutmose, the donkey was not just an animal, but a vehicle of potential wealth and productivity. And that could now be rendered in abstract language. We also get a reference to an army battalion called Glittering Like the Aten. This is a surprisingly well-documented regiment. We have references to it going back into the days of Amun-hotep III, 75 years before this period. The name Glittering Like the Aten had stuck around for this regiment and for other units, like a ship with the same name. That's important in a general sense. There's a popular misconception that Aten, the sun disk whom Akhenaten had loved, was kind of thrown out with the heretic king. The truth is quite the opposite. Aten had always been a part of the pantheon, going back more than 1,000 years. In the aftermath of Akhenaten, Aten went back to his traditional position. He lost that prominence that Akhenaten had favoured, but he remained a respectable form of the sun god, worthy of invocation. The reference to the army battalion, with a name like the Glittering Aten, reminds us that the early Ramessids did not throw Aten out with the Akhenaten bathwater. Finally, we get an interesting date. Thutmose makes a reference to the year of the bow of Jeper. From the name, it sounds like a town in Canaan or Syria. Maybe the scribe is referencing a noteworthy battle or event that took place at that location. Unfortunately, such an event is unknown from any other record, so we don't know when this bow of Jeper actually happened. Presumably, it wasn't too far back, given that that was the year the donkey went into Pa-Iri's care. But it's an interesting example of how small records, like a letter, can hint at events that seem to have been a big deal. The bow of Jeper was famous enough that people knew that was the year that happened. And yet, no royal or administrative inscription survives to document this important occurrence. It's one of those cases that makes you wonder, just how much have we lost? The letter of Thutmose and his donkey is a remarkable little document. Alas, this text is the only one surviving. Did Thutmose get his donkey back? Unknown. I hope he did. Donkeys are underappreciated historically. They may be stubborn, noisy, and hardly glamorous, but they're mellow, dependable once you earn their trust, and they'll work harder than you may expect. For our next tale, we return to the south. Not far from Deir el-Medina, but still on the west bank of Waset, a man named Min-Mose, or Born of Min, was tasked with overseeing work in a great temple. Min-Mose had a job in the memorial temple of Amun-Hotep III, Neb-Ma'at-Ra. That sanctuary was now 100 years old, give or take, and its magnificent pylons and towering statues, like the Colossi of Memnon, remained some of the tallest landmarks on the west side of the city. Amun-Hotep's temple was operational in the early Ramessid era. Min-Mose was a Wab priest, or purified one, who had responsibilities there, and he took them seriously, dispatching this letter to a colleague. Quote, "It is Min-Mose, the Wab priest of Ptah Sokar, in the temple of Neb-Ma'at-Ra, Amun-Hotep III, who addresses Sobek-Hotep, the son of Wamun, the Wab priest of Sakhmet. Please be attentive in performing the festivals of the gods, and also in making their divine offerings in the chapel of each god who resides in the temple of Amun-Hotep. Be sure to present the offerings to the one of his sunlight, namely Amun, who is in his Aten, or sun disk. Also to Horus Nefertem, the Exultant, and to Sakhmet the Great, who is within this temple, and to Wep-Wawet of the north. Make offerings to the gods of Amun, the bull of his mother, and to every god and every goddess. Please make their offerings. Do not ignore what I've said. Be mindful of the gods whom you are serving, so that in return they may give you life." End quote. It seems strange that a priest, Min-Mose, felt the need to remind his colleague, also a priest, to observe the festivals. Had Sobek-Hotep been tardy or missed some important occasion, or had he been neglecting some deities in favor of others? It's unclear from the context, but there's a couple of interesting details in here. Min-Mose references two gods, or rather three. Firstly, he mentions Ptah Sokar. That is a combination or syncretism of two great deities, Ptah, the lord of artisans, and Sokar, a lord of the necropolis and the underworld. This hybrid deity actually had their own chapel on the north side of Amun-Hotep's temple. You can see part of that chapel today when you drive past the monument on the western side. It's not much, but it gives a sense of where this business took place. Additionally, the addressee of this letter, Sobek-Hotep, was a priest for the goddess Sakhmet, she of power, the lioness of war and pestilence. Sakhmet was closely connected with Ptah and with Sokar. She also had a strong presence in Amun-Hotep's temple. Chances are you've encountered a statue of Sakhmet in museums around the world. They have a distinctive style, usually dark, a kind of blackish stone, and they show the goddess as a woman with the head of a lioness. She usually sits upon a throne, hands resting on her lap, and maybe holding a symbol of Ankh, or life. Atop her head, Sakhmet wears a solar disk with a cobra uraeus at the front. Such images are extremely common. Almost any museum with a half-decent collection has one of these. More importantly, almost all of these statues come from the temples of Amun-Hotep III. In the second or third decade of his reign, around 1370 BCE, Amenhotep had commissioned hundreds, literally hundreds, of Sekhmet images. They adorned his temple at western Waset, and over subsequent generations, many of them were removed and reused in other sanctuaries. I recounted the story of that king and his devotion to the goddess back in episode 99, titled Sekhmet's Demons. It's fun to see that a century after the temple's construction, the cult of Sekhmet in Amenhotep's sanctuary remained an important one. And thanks to those numerous statues, you can picture the images to which Menmos and his colleagues were devoted. The letter carries on with a postscript. After reminding Sobek-hotep to make offerings to all the relevant gods, he has some practical material to discuss. Quote, "Additionally, please send a message to your cultivator, who is in the fields and has control over the grain. Tell him about the harvest assessment in barley and emmer wheat, which is expected for the granary. Do not let that granary be lacking in barley or emmer, for it is upon its granary that a house stands firm. Also, attend to the cattle stable. Be mindful. Please have the cattle properly cared for. Do not turn your back on this. It is good if you take note." End quote. I like Menmos' appeal to a sort of proverb that a house stands firm based on its granary or supply of food. His concern for the animals is noteworthy, not because he necessarily cares about their well-being, but because the cattle will eventually go to the temple for slaughter. Their meat would be offered to the gods, and after that distributed to the priests and workers, including Menmos himself. So the priest is looking ahead. Take care of the cows now, and we'll have some good quality meat in the future. I love these kinds of stories. Little concerns like this may not seem like the stuff of history, but they're such lively, vital little details about ancient concerns and business. For all the grandeur of ancient Egyptian temples, statues, and the stories of their immortal gods, the people working within those environments had the same basic concerns as you or me. Speaking of relatable concerns, the next clutch of letters deal with family matters. Like this one, from a scribe named Turo, who wrote a letter to his mother. Quote, "The scribe Turo greets his mother, the singer of Amun, the name is lost, in life, prosperity, and health. How are you? Behold, I am calling upon Amun, Mut, and Khonsu, and all the gods of the southern Heliopolis, Karnak, and upon Ra when he rises, to keep you healthy, to keep you in the favor of the western mountain, and the ruling lady, to let me see you healthy every day. Behold, I am being sent to the east side, by the Chatti or vizier, to collect dues from his agents who are in the fields, because last year's balance of goods is now due. But there is no loincloth for my rear. My loincloth has been taken away. Please, give me your personal attention and have me provided with a new loincloth. Do not make me walk helpless." End quote. Turo's letter has all the vibes of a child calling home. "I've lost my clothes. Can you bring me some?" More seriously, Turo says that his loincloth had been taken away, but it's hard to know if that is accurate. Maybe he'd been punished for something, or maybe he was just being dramatic to encourage swift action. However you read it, Turo sounds like a man in desperation. Either he had left his lack of a loincloth too late and now needed urgent help, or the problem was genuinely unexpected. The letter gives an interesting insight to the domestic economy. Archaeological finds and art from tombs show that fabric production could happen in a variety of contexts. Excavators find traces of weaving and looms in small household contexts and in larger semi-industrial workshops, which means that, hypothetically, Turo could have got a loincloth from a local weaver, but apparently his mother, whose name is lost, either had a loom at home or could access one easily, so he asked her to send him new clothing. Again, it's just a fun little detail of ancient life. Along a similar tangent, we have another letter from somebody in need of vestments. This one comes from a woman named Ise, or Isis, who wrote to her sister begging for new clothing. Quote, "A message from Ise to her sister Nub Em Nu, in life, prosperity, and health. Please give your personal attention and weave for me that shawl, very promptly, before the statue of Amunhotep I, life, prosperity, health, comes forth in procession. Do this because I am genuinely naked. Make a garment for my backside because I am naked." End quote. Like Turo, Ise presents her need as the highest urgency. She is looking forward to a festival when the statue of a great king, Amunhotep I, will come forth from a shrine and go through the village. Ise is asking for a ruwedge, which might translate as shawl, but it's also the same word for a bowstring. So a ruwedge may not exactly be a shawl, a gauzy piece of cloth to wrap around you, but something more like a thong or G-string. That's a word I never thought I would say in the podcast. Again, such a garment does appear in tomb art, particularly for dancers and musicians. We have no idea what Ise's job was, but she might be asking for this kind of piece. Finally, we have two short letters that deal with housing. In the first, an unnamed writer is discussing their house at Deir el-Medina, the village of the tomb builders. Apparently, this person was going to be away from home for an extended period of time, and they made arrangements for their belongings and the house itself. Quote, "A message to inform you of the items that I left behind in the village. They were 3 car measures of barley, 1.5 car measures of emmer wheat, 26 bundles of papyrus, 2 beds, a clothes box, 2 couches for a man, 2 folding stools, 1 chest, 1 inlaid box, a stool, 2 cooking stones, 2 footstools, 2 folding stools of wood, 1 basket of lubia beans, 3 bricks of natron salt, 2 pieces of Iker furniture, 1 door, 2 offering tables, 1 mortar, and 2 medjai containers. The goods are all with Pashed and the lady Sherit Ra, all recorded." End quote. The author had packed up their belongings and stored them at a friend's house. Presumably, they intended to be away for some time, and made sure their own home was vacant of any important possessions. Which begs the question, what about the house itself? The letter continues with a postscript. Quote, "A further matter. Please allow Amun Emwia to dwell in my house, so that he can keep an eye on it. And please, write to me about your health." End quote. As this anonymous letter writer headed off from Deir el-Medina, they stored their items and made sure they had a house sitter. Again, it's a wonderfully modern text, and a nice insight to the sense of community and cooperation that existed in this village. Our final letter comes from a man named Hor Em Wia, or Horus in the Sacred Boat. He was a workman, apparently literate, or at least having access to a scribe, and he sent a nice message to his daughter. Quote, "The workman, Hor Em Wia, addresses the lady of the town, Ta Nedjes Ra, his daughter, saying to her, 'You are my good daughter. If the workman Baki throws you out of the house, I will take action. As for that house, it belongs to the pharaoh, life, prosperity, health. But you may dwell in the front room of my storehouse, because it is I who built that. Nobody in the land will throw you out of there." End quote. Horemwia must have loved his daughter dearly. For one thing, he and his partner had named her Ta Nedjes Ra, or the young sun, as in Ra. and he reassured his little Miss Sunshine that whatever happened in her home life, he would take care of her. The lady's circumstances are unclear. She seems to be living with a partner or husband, and they are dwelling in government housing of sorts. Horemwia calls it a house of Pharaoh, so it presumably belonged to the king. Maybe it was loaned or rented to the daughter's partner as part of his work. Unfortunately, that relationship had soured, and for whatever reason, Ta-Nejesra was in danger of being thrown out. Horemwia, the father, did not have much space in his own home, but he offered his daughter the front room of the storage house. I guess it's the equivalent of the room above the garage or the sleep-out in the garden. A discreet space offering some privacy and room for her belongings, where Ta-Nejesra could regroup. Dad wanted to look after his daughter. In the early Ramessid era, we have an abundance of written material, revealing stories of ordinary folks and their daily concerns. Such stories may not seem grand or historical, quote-unquote, but for my Deben, they are the delightful record of the true human experience. Behind the pharaonic grandeur, such letters reveal universal concerns. A lazy co-worker causing issues for their team, a loan or rental that has not been returned, a reminder to some underling to be attentive to their job, a plea for items like clothing when somebody has lost them, or the simple concern for one's house when going away, or one's child when their life has taken a turn and they might need assistance. In my opinion, these are the small stories that bring antiquity to life. It is wonderful that they survive. Thank you for listening to the History of Egypt podcast. What I've given you today is just 7 letters, but we have dozens, hundreds of such records from the 19th dynasty and later. If you would like me to include more in the story to come, let me know in the comments for this episode. For now, this brings us to the end of Daily Life Tales in the Ramessid era. Part 1, if we're lucky. The History of Egypt podcast is supported by you, the listeners. I would like to take a moment to thank my subscribers on patreon.com/EgyptPodcast. These fine folks help support the research, writing, and production of the show, allowing me to make this my full-time job and bring these tales to you regularly. In particular, I must give a shout-out to the priests, my top-tier backers, who give most generously of their wealth. Special thanks to Carlos, Erin, Kate, Erjan, Suyon, Setnacht, James M., Chris, Dan, Si-Yin, Karen, Jean, Jeffrey, James B., Veronica, Daniel, Ashley, Niden, Andy and Chelsea, Mycost, Yola, TJ, Terry, Eric, and Linda. Folks, you are all too kind. I am in your debt, and I hope that your co-workers are attentive and punctual with their tasks, and most importantly, that you never lack for a good supply of loincloths. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you soon.